Dice, yeah, ay, ay.
Good day and welcome. I am William, narrator for the FYI I Am Damaged podcast. Graham Robinson is an author, speaker, and men's trauma advocate who walked out of home at 13 because leaving felt safer than staying. Behind him were years of screaming parents, physical violence, knives thrown across the room, and a father who could provide food and a roof but never once said, "I'm proud of you," or "I love you." We talk about his book, Shattered Innocence, and how childhood trauma quietly shapes your emotions and relationships, and why so many men only explode later in life when that buried shame has nowhere else to go. This is the FYI I Am Damaged podcast. Now a word from our sponsor. Oscar wrote a wonderful children's book called Logan, The Strong-Minded Little Elephant. Check it out.
Meet Logan, the strong-minded little elephant who learns that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about believing in yourself even when you're scared. In this beautifully illustrated story, friends follow Logan through a colorful jungle as he learns to calm his worries, take deep breaths, and remind himself, I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. It's a story that helps kids, and maybe a few grown-ups too, find courage, mindfulness, and strength in their hearts. Logan, the strong-minded little elephant, by me, Oscar Luna. Available now at all major retailers and my publisher's bookstore, Milton and Hugo. Because it's up to every parent to show that their child deserves to know that strength starts from within.
Graham Robinson, thank you for joining me on another episode of FYI I Am Damaged. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too, Oscar. Great to be here.
Now, Graham, when someone meets you now, how do you explain who you are without starting with the hardest parts of your story?
That's a good question, because quite often if I talk at a book festival or I talk somewhere at a men's group, they know what there is. But when I have had people approach me in the street who've seen me at something and they come up and say, I heard you talking about, trauma. And I try to then pivot that into what they want to talk about, which is generally their own trauma, or somebody, more often than not, people say, I know somebody, or my husband or my partner, my wife has trauma. And it's very interesting because what you said is what they do. So I try not to, and as you sort of pointed out, I don't want to talk about my trauma immediately. I don't want to talk to them about what I've been through, because the whole thing that I like to do when advocating for men in particular is to try and get them to talk. The hardest thing, women will come up to me, partners of men will come up to me and say, my husband, my brother, whatever it might be, and they may have suffered trauma too, the women, but they're always trying to push their men forward to talk, and the men don't come up until they sort of see that it's not going to be confrontational. They seem to feel that it's, in the moment we talk about it, it's going to be difficult. So often I just try and talk about what's happened to them, try and get them to talk about their stuff. Often talk in generic terms, like so many people have suffered trauma. Most children have trauma of some sort, and then as adults, that comes out in different ways. Some can cope, some can't. So it's usually what I try to do.
Now, you left home and school at 13. What was happening in your world that made walking away feel safer than staying?
So to be honest, from the age of 5 or 6, I felt safer outside of my home than inside my home. I spent the first few years in England, and then we went to Africa. And even in Africa, I would spend my days, even in winter in England, playing in the fields, in the forests, because that's where I felt comfortable and I felt safe. In Africa, the same thing. I'd go into not so much pure bush. I mean, we weren't in areas where there were lions and so forth, but there's lots of snakes, scorpions, and other things that can get you, but I'd still be happier playing in those areas. And the reason was that when I was in the house, my parents, one of the things, apart from the physical beatings, my parents just screamed at each other all the time. That's how they communicated. And as a child, and I realize this now, I didn't know that then, I became incredibly fearful of being in that house. I feared being there because not only the noise that was happening, but I always felt in danger. I always felt that something was going to happen to me. And my parents weren't loving towards it. So you would have this dynamic between them where they screamed and yelled at each other. But it's not like the next day they would put an arm around us and make sure we understood why they were arguing or talk to us about love. Both of them were the same. They were both quite cold. And I've found out since their background, and I understand partially why. But the trouble is, as a child, we just were fearful and there was no explanation. And so that fear for me, and became the fear of my inner child, was that I was always terrified and became hypervigilant, and have spent my life hypervigilant, looking out for danger and fear. And that's why it got to the point when I was 13, we were living in Australia by then, and partially I went to school and I was put in I guess you'd call it the bad or the dumb boys class, because I wasn't doing very well, because they elevated me to a higher standard because we came from England. So they put me into a higher class and I couldn't cope. So there were two things that I knew. I knew taking my end of the year report card, which is what we had in those days, home, that I was going to be beaten the moment I showed it to them, because it wasn't very good. And I was terrified of that. And secondly, I knew that I was never going to pass the exams that came the next year, which the next year was supposed to be my last year of school, and I was only 14, or would have been 14. And I knew I was never going to pass them. So I made the decision. I threw the report card away on the way home. When I got home, I didn't give them anything. And then I went looking for a job. I had friends. Darwin was a very small town. And I had friends who knew of just all sorts of jobs going. And I ended up working in an auto electrician's. It was just fear. I understand that now, is fear of what was going to happen to me, that made me realize it was better to be out of the house than to be telling them that I was going to fail at school.
Now, your book is called Shattered Innocence. If you had to describe the before and after in just a few words, how would you capture the boy you were and the man you eventually became?
The boy was scared and desperate for loving. Like, I never had anyone put their arm around me and say, I'm proud of you or I love you. No parent. But I didn't quite understand that. But I knew that. So what I would do as a young child was I would overreact. So I would play up. I would get into trouble. I remember, I can't remember why, but I remember one day being picked up from the dining room table, and my father threw me out the front door, and it was a door with glass panels, and I put my fist through the bottom panel, cut my fist, and then ran away, and I was gone for the night. And terrified to go home, but I was probably about 8 then. And things like my mother at a Sunday lunch, my father wasn't there, but I had a brother and a sister there. And I don't know if you have ever eaten Brussels sprouts. They're really hard, horrible vegetables, and I hated them. And I'm playing around with one, and one fell on the floor, and my mother yelled at me, and then she threw a knife at me. And the knife slid across the top of my head. It was really like, if you were a circus person, it would have been the perfect throw. It was right across the top of my head, just cut it open, but it bled quite a bit. And so she wrapped me up, rushed me to the hospital and so on. But that's the environment as a child that I was in. And so, everything was like walking on eggshells. As an adult, I didn't understand. Until I was in my 50s, I didn't know that I really had childhood trauma. Now, all the things I'm telling you now sound like, how could you not understand? But as a kid growing up in it, you just accept that's what your parents are like. And because you want to love your parents, you don't judge it as trauma. That's what they're like. So anyway, as an adult, I had all of these things going on inside me that were based on my childhood trauma, like I was controlling, I was a perfectionist, difficulty with relationships, got really angry very quickly sometimes, and I didn't know why, over silly things like noise. Noise affects me. And a neighbor next door just talking, not loud music, would start to make me feel anxious. And it's the fear. The child inside is trying to control their environment. So when I got later on in life, at around 50, I was watching television and I saw a man put his arm around a boy, his son in that TV show, and I started sobbing, like really just pouring out of me. And I ended up lying on the lounge room floor, just I didn't know what was going on. I thought I was going crazy, to be honest, and I thought, this is what's happening. And so then I started looking into childhood and just Googling. And then I started to realize that I needed help, and I got help and started to really delve into what had happened to me and the amount of trauma that it had caused. And so that led me down this path of getting healing. I studied hypnotherapy to help others and wrote the books. But up until 50, I was a pretty ordinary human being. When I look back, I mean, I left my marriage by saying to my wife, or my ex-wife now, that I didn't feel like I belonged here. That was all I said to her, and I walked away. And the trouble is that I genuinely have always felt that through my life. It's one of the trauma responses, that you actually don't feel like you belong anywhere. Even in parties with friends, wherever you are, you feel like you're standing outside looking in. And so those sorts of things have followed me up until I started to get healing. And now the trauma is still there. You still retain the trauma, but you can manage it. So when anger comes on, I have skills to manage that. I don't feel like I'm alone anymore. I understand where I am now, and so on. So the man now, it's in two parts really. Up until about late 40s, early 50s, I wouldn't have been somebody I wanted as, I was loyal to my friends and they wouldn't have known, but I had a lot of these traumatic responses. After that, I started to change, and the last few years have been fantastic in that sense. I couldn't even hug someone. I could never put my arms, male or female. I could never, how so many people, even at an airport, I remember going, my brother lives a couple of 1,000 kilometers or about 1,000 miles from me. And I flew to see him this time, and he was in the airport, and I wanted to hug him, but I couldn't. I stood there stiff as a rod, just looking. And this is my brother, and, we both do love each other, and we both care about each other, but I couldn't hug him then. Now it's the first thing we do. I have no problems even hugging someone new. So it is that traumatic to you. These are the things that happen. So I've lived 3 lives, you could say, Oscar. The kid, the bad human, and now hopefully the better human.
Oh no, I'm there with you. I'm transitioning to the better human because there's a lot of things that you said that I genuinely connect to about what I was going through in my childhood, early adulthood, and before I was put in a position to finally face one of my biggest traumas and then heal, and then seeing the weight of healing and how it helps you, but also seeing the mountain, meaning it's going to take some while to climb that and to reach a place. And it's all about understanding. The same way physically, if you're physically climbing a mountain, you have to understand your footing. You got to make sure you have the right equipment and tools with you. It's the same thing with your emotional healing. And for men, it's not get up and go. It's a lot of prep work to even begin to start healing.
You're absolutely right. It's a long journey. And I often, if I talk to somebody, I'm in the belief that you don't completely remove all of that trauma. It sits in your body, but the fact that you're doing the work, as you know, releases so much each day you work on it, or whenever you do. It's funny you mention the mountain, because I did a week-long retreat after I started getting help. This woman recommended that I go to this retreat, and it was very good for me, where you could really express your trauma. But I remember, and they had counselors with us to help us through. And I remember this one event where they got us to lie down on these small mattresses and go deep into what was going on. And in my mind's eye, I remember I had to go they were taking us into this dark cave. That's where they let you choose. And that's what I saw. And that was what I was going into. Before I entered the cave, I remember in my mind's eye looking back, and I saw thousands and thousands of children on a mountain stacked on top of each other. And it made me realize how many kids are suffering, you know. And and that sort of woke you up to the fact that you're not alone, but that, you know, this is such a deep thing for so many people. And men, you know, it's great when men start talking about that they had these problems and that they are doing something, because, you know, certainly men my age, much older than you, have lived with it and don't just accept the way they are. And, you know, the rage that comes out of them, and it comes out later in life quite more than it does, you know, younger. When I was younger, I didn't have the sort of, there were incidences of rage, but I really didn't have the sort of rage that I started to have later after 40s when I get triggered. And it was scary because I'd go from what we're talking like now, I could go to this raging fanatic. And I could have got myself killed, beaten up, whatever. I was just fortunate I didn't. It just comes from nowhere. And of course, now I know it's not nowhere. It's that trauma that sits in your body. It sits in your in your nervous system. And the other thing is there's a pure health connection here too. The studies they've done on kids with early childhood trauma show that adults suffer from more adults that have had trauma suffer from diabetes, cancers, heart diseases, all of those things. And we all know that stress brings on all sorts of things. So, you know, there's also, for those who are sort of say, and I've had people say to me, it's all rubbish, the inner child, I wasn't hurt. It's, you know, I got smacked as a kid. Everybody did. Just accept it. But the trouble is that, you know, deep inside there's stuff going on, you know, and the people who see it are their loved ones, their family, their kids, their partner. They see that the person is not quite right when certain situations occur. So, yeah, you're right. It is a huge mountain. But the good thing, as you are and as I am, the work works. So you do it and you heal. You've got to feel the feelings, which is the hard thing. You've got to feel what's happened to you. And that's not pleasant, because some of this stuff is really deep. And you also, I don't know in your case, but in my case, I thought, so the first incident that I thought was the triggering moment was when I was 5. I stole a couple of toy helicopters from his shop, and my father, I played with them in the car. My father he stopped the car, took off his belt, and he started whipping me, and I was running through this forest. And I thought that was it. When I did the work with this lady, she dug into where the real depth of trauma, and it was not that at all. What happened was that when I was in England as a young kid, about 6, I won 3rd prize in an art competition, and the school was holding this big, you know, presentation and so on, and nobody turned up for me. My parents didn't attend, and I was watching these kids up on stage with their parents, and nobody was there for me. She got to that point, and that was my deepest trauma, because really the trauma of not being loved is the one that really, really changes our personality, because we change our uniqueness to try and make people love us. So as a kid, you try and do these things to make them love you. And of course, it doesn't change, it doesn't work.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Please
I was going to
finish.
say that was the trigger point. And I didn't realize, I thought it was the beatings, but it wasn't. They were part of it. And that made me realize that he didn't care about me. But the one that really hurt me the most was that one for that. And I thought it was nothing then, but I didn't realize how much I'd absorbed. So, you know, we don't always know what our deep triggers are.
Yeah, and I'm doing my best to kind of flip that script because, you know, I have 3 boys, and, you know, the way you say for me, I hold on to the care because of what I've been through. I'm extra caring to those, that I love, and or at least who I hold in regard in my life. And if that's not returned, it feels like a deep wound,
Mm.
and so that I know it. A lot of the things you're saying, it's almost as if, like, I'm walking with you. I've been through it in my own version, and I'm only 47. I'm hitting that 50 mark, and I'm like, shit, man. I wish I was healing sooner, because I'm going from angry and acting out to being remorseful. So rather than getting upset with myself, then I'm just getting sad. Like,
Mm.
damn, I could have did these things differently. And I'm having a different approach in life. And it's still hard. It still slips where I'm trying to work on myself and move forward, switching up therapists. And it is rough, because it's handling all you handle in your life and people going through the same thing. And then, okay, now I have to unravel my traumas. Now I have to heal. I can't be the person that I was, that people think who I am negatively, or withdraw myself, and also being afraid of vulnerability. I've the one thing I'm grateful for is knowing that I find, and I always say this a lot, is like, I find my strength through vulnerability now than it was before, than feeling that it was weakness. And that encourages others to say, okay, wow, he's doing that. He's saying this. He's being honest about what he's been through. And they follow that lead to a point, to their comfort. And I asked them, I'm like, get curious about what's going on, get curious about, am I really healing? And if you're not, then figure out what's the best way for you to heal. Is it, straight up therapy? Is it doing all sorts of other things, going on retreats, or whatever? But it's like, you have to start somewhere, and something down the line will ring your bell to be like, wow, I can be the person who I should have been, but not in a regretful way.
It's interesting. I so much agree with what you said about when it would be so good if we were in our 15, 16, if we found this, understood this. I would have had such a different life, and you would have too, in terms of the decisions we make sometimes come from our trauma. We make these terrible decisions, or we make these decisions that hurt others from our trauma. If we didn't have that, I know that I would be fairly sure I'd still be in my marriage. And I have 3 children, and I know that that hurt them. Although we have good relationships now, I know it hurt them. And I know it will continue to be a thing for them. So yes, you're right. I've spoken to some younger men about it, but they're all generally already in work. They're already understanding. It's the ones who don't accept that they've been traumatized, who want to do the macho, want to do, hey, nothing's wrong with me, I'm okay. They're the ones we have to talk to get to and say, hey, it's okay. You're still a macho man. You're still a big, strong guy, but you need to fix the inside as well. And you're right. I wish so much that I could have understood this at 20, but at 20, I was doing what we all do at 20, getting drunk, doing some drugs, doing whatever, working to just get through and thinking that I was doing okay. And when I look back, if I talk to friends who I had in the 20s, they would say, well, we didn't notice anything strange. And I probably didn't either. I was just, because when you're young, you sort of, these things aren't coming out as much as when you get older, but they're there. And if you talk about them, yeah. And healing, you're right, is, I found a thing called EFT, which is tapping, which really helped me. But in my book, I talk about all these simple ways of finding healing. Breathing is really good, breath work, just to reduce anxiety. With my anger, I named it. I found that, so I call my anger George. So when I start to feel it build up, it doesn't happen so much now, but when I do, I just put a hand on my chest and say, no, George, we're not doing that. So it's like, not so much a friend, but if you had a friend who was about to do something silly, you say, no, you can't do that. That's dangerous. It's the same principle, but to yourself, to your inner child, because your inner child is the one that's getting worked up, not you, so to speak. So simple things can be done, but everybody does need to work with professionals who work with childhood trauma, absolutely. And the difference, and obviously with you too, the difference between when you start the work and to where we are now is huge. Even though we still have our traumas, it's huge. You know, you talk about vulnerability and being able to be vulnerable. That's something we never did when we were young. We put the wall up and we caged ourselves in, and women, men, we didn't let them in. And we would, I don't know about you, but I would laugh and smile and joke at parties or with people, but I'd go home and I'd cry and I'd be sad and I'd feel alone. They would
Yeah.
never know. They'd never know
Yeah.
because I'd be on my own. The only, just on that, the one last thing, you're already loving to your children. That's the one thing that I would say to everybody. Love your children. I mean, obviously don't hit them, don't hurt them, but don't ignore them. Don't be an absent parent. Even though you're working hard and doing all that, love them, play games in the backyard, do whatever, because that's all as kids that we want. That's all. And it's just so sad that the parents, I know why we get caught up in all of that, and they're not being bad parents necessarily. They're not hitting or abusing their kids in any way. But if you don't have the emotional love, kids still grow up with traumas. And so that's all kids want is love.
And it's such the most simplest thing too. It's like when
Mm.
realizing that, and I have kids in different stages, and it's just so simple. People
Yeah.
think like if they get caught up with in their relationships and they don't have kids, that something needs to be a whole production. Like, no, you can have fun with having three boxes of different sizes, ball up some paper, and play a game of like earning points and just see who can get the most in,
Yeah.
and something like that. And it amazes me that people who want to do the most simplest thing make it so complicated. Like, it doesn't really need to be, but it's easier said than done, and it's also a learning process. Once you start it, then it refines itself.
And when I was young, my father, like, he provided for us food, presents, all of those things, roof over our heads. We didn't go without, but there was no, as I said before, no emotional connection. But when he would sit down and in those days play board games, he would sit and I would be so happy, like I would feel totally different that he was there. And then and he wouldn't stay that long, but when he would, and when he left, I would be so disappointed. I remember the feelings because those were the few moments that I felt we connected together. I remember I was in the car alone with him once. I can't remember why, but we had to stop it. He was going back to work. I had to stop at a cafe in England. They're on the motorways, and we stopped and we had fish and chips. He said nothing to me during that entire meal, but I felt like I was special because it was just the two of us having a meal together. It's not big stuff that kids need. It's that connection. And you're right, playing a game like that, as you say, like throwing rolled up paper into a cardboard box would, certain age, it would keep them happy, or keep most of them happy forever. It's being with you that matters, not the game. You can do anything, walking in the park, throwing a ball in the park, taking the dog for a walk. It's being with you. That's the thing that kids want.
Yeah.
And, as you grow up as an adult, but you're right, we forget, we miss it as kids, and then as we become adults, we don't do as much. I didn't spend as much time with our children as I should have. And they weren't abused or hit or any of that, but I know that I still should have been with them more. Looking back, you should have still done more with them. It's simple things, swings in a park, whatever, throwing a ball, it's just all you need to do.
Absolutely.
But yes, we do forget those things as adults, don't we?
Now, a core theme in your work is the father wound, as we've been discussing. What do men suddenly recognize in themselves, and if applicable, what is often sitting underneath that constant rage? Other than what we've discussed, if there's anything else you can identify.
So really what happens when you go back to the core of it, when your father or your mother or both, and could be caregivers, doesn't have to be actual your biological parents. So when they don't show you emotional connection, love, put their arm around you, speak nicely to you, support you, and so on, what happens is as kids, we start to create this different identity inside because we think then they'll love that. So kids look at it in black and white. You either love me or you hate me. There's no grey for them, and especially younger kids. And so we create a new personality, so to speak, inside. And this is the one that is we hope will be loved. And of course, it doesn't change anything, but it's the traumatic personality that's then developed, so to speak. And so what happens is we are left, because our parents don't love us, we think we are bad. We think we are no good. So we have what they call toxic shame. It's not shame about like when I stole the helicopters, I should have been ashamed. My father should have taken me back, made me apologize, paid for me, and not given me the helicopters. That's the appropriate adult reaction. And I would have been ashamed. But toxic shame is this deep shame that we believe we're not worthy, that we're no good because our parents don't love us. So that's the core of most of our problems. And so, or at least the deepest core. And so the rage comes from the shame. So people are triggered for different reasons, but what happens is that shame that we're no good, the inner child, when they feel this and they feel a danger around them, let's say road rage. So even when you're driving, you see road rage happen. Somebody comes along and flips their lights at you or does something else, and you suddenly start to get your fists are clenched and you go, you get really start to feel that anger. That's your inner child going, for some reason that's triggered something from your childhood. And your rage gets nearly uncontrollable and you go after the person. And it comes from that base of shame that you weren't loved, that nobody loves you or likes you, you're bad. And he's treating or she's treating you bad now. And so that's a simplistic view, and I'm not a doctor or a psychologist. I'm just going from my own knowledge and from what happened to me. But that's basically what happens, is that shame triggers off all of these emotional responses. And if people mistreat us or ignore us, or we get sort of sidelined, we get upset and angry because that's what happened to us as a kid. That goes back all the way. That inner child sees that danger as that's what the parents did. So that's what blows up in us, and that produces rage. It can produce other things in different kids. It can mean that a child will simply disappear a bit. So that was mine. When I was a kid, I wasn't an angry kid except with my parents, but with everybody else, I just disappeared. I just left. And so that was mine, running away, some would say. But others react differently. So it all depends on the level of trauma and the sort of trauma that happens to you. But the core issue for us is shame. We're ashamed of who we are because nobody likes us and we're bad. And that's the child thinking that. But it remains in you as an adult. So even though consciously you know that's rubbish, you've got a beautiful partner, you've got children, you've got great friends, you know people care about you, none of that matters. In essence, it matters, but none of that matters to the inner child. When something goes wrong or triggers it, it feels the same shame that you're no good. And that's what explodes. And the inner child goes over the top. It's like a tiger roaring at something that's threatening its cubs because it wants to be big and scare it away. And of course, in an adult interaction, that over the top can cause somebody else to come react back in that way. And that's really very basically, but that's what happens. And that's what's going on.
And they're so blind to when they're reacting to you because you're lashing out at them. How can they view someone who is hurt and acting out while they're on the defense? And then it's that cycle of they don't know, and well, nobody's a mind reader. Nobody knows that you're reacting from your trauma. Those individuals like yourself and I can most likely realize that and kind of stop that in its tracks and say, hey, look, what's really going on? But others, they just react and they're deafened by just the anger that's in the room and not giving the other person grace to say, hey, look, what you said wasn't nice. I understand where you're coming from and what you might be going through. Let's find a different approach. So, I would love to see people take that approach first rather than just getting ready to rumble.
Yeah, and you're right. If you wouldn't know it's coming from trauma, even a partner, like, when if we talk about domestic violence, which a lot of it is associated with men or women who've had childhood trauma, but when it comes up, the other person reacts, as you say. They don't think about it. And it's interesting because when you've started to do the work, you do start to think about those things when you see people the way they act. And I've had a couple of not altercations with me, but in a group setting where I've been able to say, "Hey, it's okay. He's not attacking you. It's okay. You can, let's talk." In one instance, it calmed down. The other instance, the person walked away. But the fact is that instantly you can see that this person is got other stuff going on, and sometimes they're just having a bad day as well. Not every child has been traumatized, but the majority of children in this world have faced some trauma growing up. But you're right, it would be great if we could stop. But people, it's that interaction, especially between males. It's the whole, warrior, hunter, gatherer, all of that comes out, and they find it impossible to stop.
Now, you mentioned about your inner child. So, in your own healing, what did meeting your inner child look like so that those who want to approach that sort of situation, knowing they had a rough childhood, but don't know really how to approach that? It's only because I went through that. I had a great interview with one of my guests, Mandy, and I told her, I said, the interview, from what I recall, so I was basically said like the interview almost didn't happen because I was having a moment before the interview where I had to stop and I was very emotional. I was apologizing to my inner child. And that was the first time I ever did it. And I was like, I'm sorry what you went through. I'm sorry that, you know, your life is going to be the way it is and what you're going to go through. Like, I'm sorry. And having that, like getting a little emotional about it now. And it was very eye opening, very somber after it was done, and really affected me because I'm like, okay, I got something to do. I have a job to do. And I'm like, why am I going through this right now? But it's when you need to face it, it's like you have to face it. And that actually helped me go through, level myself out, have the interview, and again, being vulnerable about it when something touched off to explain it. And it's something that I think a lot of, especially men, they need to find, if they can, find a baby picture of themselves, as them young, like, between 5 or 10, and just have a conversation. And whether it's just hello, all right, stop, and then revisit, like, and make it a little more longer. I think it does wonders. Now, with the question about you meeting your own inner child and what did it look like, and how has that work changed the way you show up in adult relationships?
So there are several ways that you can meet your inner child. For me, it was working with the therapist. She took me in and she brought the child forward. So I saw this little child that wouldn't approach me for a while. I was and then eventually the child came forward and she wanted me to sit down, in my head, in vision, sitting down, talking to the child, and doing what you just said, apologizing to the child for the childhood they had, telling them that I'm here now. Because basically we have to reparent. That's what we're doing. We're being the parent of our inner child, as like you would be with your other children. And so telling them that I was here, I would protect them, never leave them, I would love them, and they are now safe. Safety is one of their biggest concerns for the inner child because it's never been safe. That's why they're traumatized. So I would do that, and I would do that on a relatively regular think. So the idea was that I might be lying on the bed in the morning, and I might just place my hand on my stomach and say good morning to my inner child. It's going to be a great day. You're fine. You're safe. And I know a lot of people who may listen to this and might say, oh, I can't do that. But quite honestly, you can. It doesn't take much. You don't have to announce it to the world. You don't have to tell anybody. You just have to do it in your mind. You don't have to speak the words out loud. You just speak them in your mind to your inner child. And even now I can feel my inner child calming a little. They get nervous. They get upset whenever you start talking about the trauma. They start to get a little flustered. And so by talking about words and using words like love and care, safety, they calm down, and you can feel it in your stomach. It's in your stomach. You will feel it. The other thing, if you move past that, you can write a letter to your inner child. And so one of the ways to do that is you write with the hand you normally use. So if you're right-handed, you write to the inner child, and in that letter say that you're sorry they were treated like they were. You know what happened to you. So it doesn't have to be long, just a few words. And then take a moment and then write back to yourself from the inner child with your left hand, or the hand that you don't normally use. If you're left-handed, it would be your right-handed. And even though it may be a little difficult to read, your inner child will respond. They may say, I'm very scared. I still find it hard to love. And so you start having that conversation. You don't have to do the letter writing all the time, but it's a good way to break through in a way. Looking at a photograph of when you were really happy as a child is another great idea. I don't have any, so I can't find any of very early ones. But there are all of these ways, and mainly just understand that you have an inner child, that your inner child was damaged, and now you're the parent of that inner child as much as you're a parent of anybody else. And just talk to it in your own mind. And at first you might feel a bit silly. Sometimes people do. But if you do it a few times, you'll start to realize that something is working, because you'll feel calmer within your body. It actually, as you know, it does have a calming effect. And it's interesting you mentioned just before you're about to do a recording, there may have been something about the recording, there may have been something about the subject matter, there may have been something even in the room that just triggered something in you a little, and your inner child started to feel fearful. And that's why it demanded your attention at that time. That's what happens. It doesn't always come at the best times, does it? At the times when we want it to. It comes when the child feels. And again, even if you're out in public, you can just place your hand on your stomach. Nobody would know. It looks like you're just rubbing your stomach, and just say you just have to say it's okay. You don't even have to say anything else. It's okay. Everything's all right. Because their fears, as I said before, are not, you'll be walking down the street and feel absolutely safe. You look around, people playing, kids everywhere, it's safe. Something though, your inner child feels something that scares them. And so it's totally different fear. As an adult, you don't fear, but this inner child is fearful, and that's all you have to do. Just calm it down with a little pressure on your stomach and tell them, yeah, you're okay. We're all good here. And that's, it's that simple, really.
I could imagine right now there's a few listeners probably wiping away some tears right now listening, because if they're like me, once someone's describing something, they kind of play it in their head, and for someone to do that with their inner child and with their life, that would get me, like, to do that, because I know it was, when I did that for myself, it was a rush of emotion. It almost felt like you're standing in front of you have a tsunami behind you and it's pushing you, actually. And it's just, you're riding the wave, and with all these emotions, and you're like, what the hell? And it feels good after a while, because like how I said, like once I did it, I calmed down, and I was ready to speak on it. So I was glad that when I had that interview, it came up. And it puts on display that, it's very powerful when you're finally starting, or even just inkling of getting connected to your emotions and understanding, okay, this is what I've been through, this is what I'm processing, and doing those things that you described. It's even with just simple internal conversation, like, it really matters. And people don't see that until they actually put themselves in that position. So I really call upon anyone listening to this, just try it, please try it, and you're gonna see how it makes a difference with how you react to yourself, how you react to your significant other, your children, because even though I'm not perfect at it, it has lightened the load and I see the
Mm.
difference in them. I have one child that he could retreat within himself. I have another who lashes out. And but I also, because I have a 15, a 13, a soon to be 13-year old, and a 5-year old. So you have varying degrees, but the two older ones, they've gone through it the most. And I see the difference now. My oldest one who can retreat within himself, he's a little bit outgoing. The middle child, I have to got to work with him on that because they say normally the middle child is like he's just the semi wild card, but the third one is the wild card. So, and I love getting to know their personality. I love that when they're dealing with each other or they're doing something, like, I don't know if you've actually dealt with that, but like, you've heard your children's natural laughter, when they're just all of a sudden like, oh wait, that's their laugh when they're unguarded and they think something's funny, and
Mm.
and I know it's not something like ha ha ha, yeah, that was funny, and you're like, oh no, don't bullshit me, I know that's not your laugh, and so it speaks a lot to know that I know my children's true laughter, and I'm honored to be witness to it rather than them being afraid to show it in front of me. So I know that I have a long way to go, but doing that, the returns are amazing. They feel fulfilling rather than any paycheck or anything that you think might, um, be worth it.
And absolutely, I mean, it's my one of my fondest memories as a father, as a parent, was having either all of my children. I have three, and their ages are a bit different too. But having them on the lounge, watching maybe a movie, and them cuddling up and falling asleep in my lap, and just sitting there with me quietly, and as you say, laughing at the movie, feeling content in each other's company and honest and authentic in each other's company. And those are my greatest memories. I mean, like everybody, we went on holidays, we did other things, we bought them stuff, but the reality is those simple things were the things that I really remember. And understanding your children sometimes is not always easy, but it is a matter of just spending time, as you said, spending time with them, getting to know them, and listening. It's also listening to them, letting them talk, letting them. I have one daughter who talks constantly, and a son who really didn't talk very much at all, but really working with them with what they are, because they're all special. But yeah, you're right. It's that knowing, and once you understand that, as you said, there's no greater feeling.
Yeah,
I mean, I know everybody always says that, oh, my children, but we don't always live it. We don't always do it. And yeah, it's important too.
absolutely. Now, what do you think our culture still gets most wrong about what male trauma looks like? And maybe you have to straddle the line of talking to someone who, I don't know how much of you aware in the American culture how it is with Australian culture, and I don't know where the level line is, but please give me your perspective.
So I don't think it's incredibly dissimilar between America and Australia, or even the UK. I mean, there are cultural effects in America that we don't have here, and vice versa. But for men, still believe that. I still think I see so many men who still believe in the silence is the best option if I'm feeling bad. I don't want to show weakness. I can't show weakness. And it is really something that I don't know how we break through in a big way. It feels like it's us picking away bit by bit by bit, like the whole story about a pebble in a pond that creates ripples across the pond. That's what we're doing. That's what you're doing with talking about this on your podcast. That's what we're doing. You might, even if it's one person who listens to your podcast who goes, yeah, I'm going to try that with the inner child, or I'm going to think about, my reactions are similar to Oscar's and I'm going to do something about it. That's a win. Even when I wrote the book, somebody said to me, what do you want to happen with the book? I said, one person to change would be a win for me by reading it, because ultimately that then it happens. I mean, there was, for example, imagine if you change, or if you were able to get hold of or have a conversation with some of the really bad people that we've had in history who've been abused by their fathers, and change their perspective before they became tyrants or whatever. And there's a lot of them, but maybe imagine how much of a change in the world you could do by changing that one person. So you never know, this one person that suddenly gets to understand, but through your program, may have gone on to be quite bad, actually may take a different path because of it. And so that's the goal. Men across the world, I think, still believe, genetically we're made up to be hunter-gatherers, and I mean, that still stays. I don't think that's ever going to leave us, because it's so deep in our core. It's really the pure core of where we came from. So, but men have to realize that they can also be open to emotions and be able to share feelings, not contain them just to be seen as this hard strength that, everybody must depend on. And that's the other thing. Males feel that, well, everybody depends on me, I must be strong. And that's not necessarily true. They may depend on you, but you can still show your emotions and show them how you feel, and show your partner how you feel, and show your family, show your kids. You can cry in front of your kids. You can do those things. Show them that get upset too, and that things hurt you. I don't know if there is a solution to that male approach to it, but programs like this, all the other things that happen, I mean, there's a lot more discussion now. Social media is good and bad because there's lots of different varying opinions. So my argument there would be, as you said earlier, take what works for you. Look for what works for you and take that. Don't listen to anybody else as saying this will work, that will definitely work. Have a look at stuff, take what works for you. There's a million therapies out there, and some of them are fantastic, but everybody's different, so they take different roads. So only go with what works for you. It may be that you work on yourself for quite a bit before you see a professional, or you may feel you don't need to. I would recommend doing it in some field, but that's entirely an individual's choice. But it is, as we move through the years, maybe males and parenting hopefully improves, and then males will be able to share emotion and see emotion from their parents, so therefore they don't feel it's unusual. Like, if you don't ever see emotion in the house, if you don't get that learning curve from your parents about how you should interact with people, then how do you know what to do as an adult? You haven't learned that. You watch your other friends. I see friends who could arms around each other, cuddle, laugh. I couldn't do that. And when they came near me, I would tense up when they went to do it to me, and they would back off because they would see it. So, you need to learn it from your parents. And if you haven't, then you need to make the effort to cuddle your friends next time you see them. Do something that may surprise them, but put your arms around them, tell them you care about them, but whatever. And guys will go, no, you can't do that. But, yeah.
Yeah, and also giving that insight as a parent to a child, totally all for all of that. And also, yeah, giving them the insight, because they may not be able to relate or identify what you're trying to explain to them. And that, you can have someone who's a parent, like, well, if they're listening, they'll get it. Like, no, they don't have the weight of experience that you as an adult have. It's like, no, I'm doing this because of X, Y, and Z, and this and that. And you know what? You're not speaking to a wall, you're speaking to a child. They're going to take it in, they're going to get some context, which is the proper word I'm trying to get, along with the insight to say, you know what? Okay, they're teaching me something. Even though they're not saying that in their head, they understand that, yeah, there's a lesson there to be learned. And even though it may be repeated and parents shouldn't, that's one thing I have to do is also not really get upset with repeating something to, my child who, okay, doesn't have the weight. And my wife has called me on it too. She's like, how the hell are they going to know? How are they going to know? And I'm like, shit, you're right. I need to understand that they're not in their late 40s. They haven't gone through what I've gone through. I've done my best to make sure that they don't experience what I have to a certain degree. They've experienced their own thing, especially with school and everything and how it can be with other children. And I'm like, no, she's right. You have to offer the context. You can't just say, do as I say and not as I do, and et cetera, all those negative ancient things that they don't serve us now. They don't serve us now, and they don't serve a child who is just wanting to learn from their parent. When a parent, when they're by themselves, is like, oh, I just want to teach my kids. I want them to learn from me. I want them to learn from my mistakes and everything. Like, okay, but the approach, that's what you're remorsing about in that instance. You're not flipping the script and approaching it when you need to, when it's that proper time and it's that learning phase, which there are going to be tons of.
And, as you mentioned, we sometimes dismiss even sometimes our children's questions or feelings or responses. We can, I'm too busy, I'm doing this now, and they go away. And so we do need to be aware, as you say, aware of what they need, even though it may be a very simplistic question, like you go, oh, come on, you must know the answer to that. Well, no, they don't. Otherwise, they don't ask. So it is, as you said, it is taking that time, understanding where they're at, and just sitting down with them and going, hey, what's going on? Bullying, you mentioned school. Bullying at school and bullying in general is one of the worst things that we have going on in this world for all kids. It happens to most kids, not all, of course. There are some who go through school. I didn't hang around long enough to be overly bullied. But, I remember, especially in Africa, I was an English kid. I had a woodwork teacher, in fact, in England, who was taking a history class. And over there was a war that the English were involved in the 1800s. It was called the Boer War. And they did terrible things to the Afrikaners, which are the white Africans in Africa. And this woodwork teacher, he, in Afrikaans, and I'd only been in the country about 3 months, so I didn't speak Afrikaans, asked a question in Afrikaans, and then he pointed at me to answer, and I couldn't. So he called me up to the desk, and I stood alongside him. He asked me again. And then when I couldn't answer, he took the inside skin of my leg and twisted it. And then he asked the questions again, and I still couldn't answer because I didn't understand the question. And I said that to him, and he said, you should know Afrikaans, and he twisted again, and then sent me back. So, that bullying from adults as well as the kids in the school. Kids, when they're bullied, their reactions are things about you have to talk to your kids too about bullying and about not bullying and how you react to bullies. There is no easy answer either. I'm not pretending that there's an easy answer to it. It isn't. There isn't. But yeah, bullying in school is a real problem. And I mean, as I say, I don't know the answer, but individually you have to just be with your kids, talk to them and work out what's happening, don't you? And try and talk to them, because it's traumatic for them too. And we know some of the end results of that trauma.
Yeah. Now, when readers finish your book, Shattered Innocence, what do most hope has enlightened them in how they see their own childhood and the person that they are now?
I would hope, as you mentioned during this chat, that some of the things I write about resonate with them. So they see themselves, oh yeah, that happened to me too. So that's a trauma, is it? I hope they look at it like that, because many of them may be understanding that there's a bit of trauma in their life, but they don't know how it's showing up in their adult life. And so Shattered Innocence, my first book was just about what happened to me as a 13-year-old and when I left home and so on. Didn't look at how the trauma took my adult life, but the second book does. And so I would hope when they read that they see themselves in it in certain parts and understand that, okay, that is a trauma. That's, because a lot of the time, I don't know about you, but I thought I was just normal and that's the way I was. Like the fact that I felt alone or the way I kept having bad relationships, like I would create arguments with the women I was in to force them to leave, to say, oh, I don't want to stay with you anymore. But it was because I had this fear of abandonment. So I would do that. So I would like them. So I put all this stuff, everything that's happened to me is in this book. And I've also put some healing techniques and understandings. Now, they're simple ones. Some are just breathing, some are meditation, some are like writing letters and so forth, for people to do some simple work. And then to, consider going to get professional help. So it's really about identifying that they too had traumas when they thought maybe that was just what everybody had to go through as a kid and it's no big deal. The trouble is, it is a trauma or it is abuse.
Yeah. Now, finally, Graham, where can listeners connect with you, explore your books, or work with you if they're ready to start looking at their own father wound, any anger or inner child work more closely?
So, I mean, even if they just wanted to chat, I'm always happy to have a chat with somebody if they want to understand what's happened to them. So my website is grahamrobinsonwellness.com, and the books are on Amazon: Shattered Innocence, Healing the Invisible Wounds of Childhood Trauma, and Pain, Loss and Desire, both on Amazon. So you can check those out. But my website also has information about the books. I'm just as happy to sit down and, if they're in the US, I'd set up a Zoom and just chat. I just would like to see more people become aware of where they're at in their life with the trauma. That's really the goal.
I'll make sure to link everything that is pertaining to your work, and thank you so much for sharing your time with me, your vulnerability as well, and everything that you're trying to do with your books and your movement and everything like that. I truly, truly appreciate everything that you shared with me, Graham. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. It's been great chatting to you. Thank you, Oscar. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Oscar. That was an impactful episode. If you were wiping your eyes at any point in this episode, you're not alone. With Graham, we walked through a childhood of screaming parents, physical abuse, being forgotten on the day he won an art prize, and leaving home at 13 because fear felt bigger than the future. We heard how that early wound turned into decades of toxic emotions and a constant sense of not belonging, even in a marriage, even surrounded by friends. If something in his story sounded like your story, take that as an invitation, not an indictment. You might start as simply as placing a hand on your chest or stomach and saying, silently, "You're safe. I'm here." Adelante siempre por tu mente. Forward always for your mind. This is the FYI I Am Damaged podcast.
In a bright green jungle where the tall trees sway, lived a little elephant who felt big feelings. Every day Logan loved to splash and play by the riverside, with sometimes wobbly legs made him wanna run and hide. Tummy doing flips like a stormy shaking drum. A tiny voice inside him whispered, "What if I can't have fun?" Then Brandon, the wise monkey, smiled from the tree, said, "Little friend, take a breath, come and sit with me. Feel your feet on the ground, feel your hand on your heart. We're breathing together, that's how courage starts. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Breathe it in slow, let it out with a wish. When my mind feels wiggly like a monkey in the trees, I calm my heart down with my breath and my knees. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Step by step forward through this, scared and know what if. Even when my tummy feels funny and tight, I can still be brave, I can still shine bright. Next day in the jungle they played a game of tag. Logan felt the nervous pull, his body started to drag, but he remembered Brandon and the tools you had inside. Took a deep, gentle breath instead of running off to hide. Breathe in the sunshine, breathe out all the fear. Stomped his big elephant feet and felt his courage appear. With the wiggle of his front cantilap so free, whispered to himself, there's a lion heart in me. His friends saw him smiling as he joined in the game. They asked, Logan, what's your secret? You don't look the same. He said, when my thoughts get loud, I don't have to stay small. I breathe and move my body and I stand up tall. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Breathe it in slow, let it out with a wish from my mind. Be wiggly like a monkey in the trees. I calm my heart down with my breath and my knees. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this step by step forward through the scared and oh what if. Even when my tummy feels funny and tight, I can still be brave. I can still shine bright. Little heart listening, this song is for you. It's okay to feel scared, that feeling's true. But just like Logan in the jungle so wide, you've got quiet, steady strength living inside. So breathe in slowly, feel your feet on the floor. Let your shoulders soften, you don't need to. Whisper to yourself when the worries rush through. I am strong, I am safe, and I know what to do. I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. Breathe it in slow, lay it out with a wish. When my mind feels wiggly like a monkey in the trees, I calm my heart down with my breath and my knees. I am strong, I assist, I can do this step by step forward through the skin and know what it is. Logan showed the jungle and I show the world. There's a strong-minded hero in every boy and girl in the bright green jungle. When the stars shine above, brave little hearts fall asleep feeling safe.